Hello, Victoria, and welcome to the Conscious Early Learning podcast. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
Hi, Sarah. I'm so good. I'm so excited to be here and share some knowledge with you.
I would love if you could start by introducing yourself to our listeners, like a little bit about your work as a psychologist and how the Safe Kids project came to life.
Yeah. So, my name is Victoria Barendsen. I am a registered psychologist and I have been for about 8 years now. I predominantly work with children, but sort of that varies anywhere from like the age of 5 up to sort of 25 is where I specialize. At the moment, I have a private practice, but previously I have worked in government organizations as well as non for profit. But in my private practice, I predominantly work with children who have experienced trauma and then more specifically sexual abuse. So this is my sort of day in, day out work, and I feel incredibly privileged to do this work. It's obviously got a lot of challenges, and there is difficult things about the job, but to be able to hold space for a young person and their family or whānau during that time is pretty special. So I feel really, really, grateful to be doing what I get to do. But it did get to a point where I just felt a little bit like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And I do love therapy and I love that aspect of the job, but I really felt like there needs to be more being done at the preventative space for children and young people so that our communities can be safer, because the statistics are crazy. It's something like 1 in 3 females and 1 in 6 males will experience some form of sexual harm before adulthood. That's in New Zealand. And so that's a really, really alarming statistic, but yet there's still really nothing being done in a preventative space. And so how it kind of came to be for me was I actually had this one particular client, and one area of my work is also supporting young people who have sexually harmed others as well. And this young person came to see me. He had experienced sexual abuse himself and then went on to harm his siblings, which was really, really heartbreaking for him, for his family. And it was a really challenging case. But it wasn't unfamiliar to me. Like, it was something that I felt really comfortable doing, and not normally would worry me. But this particular day, he came into the session and he was telling me about how he'd met a younger girl online. He was talking about his intentions with her, and I just felt sick. Like, for the first time, I thought, I actually can't do this job. Like, it was this full wave of panic and I guess like realization that this is a world we're living in. And the reason that was because I was pregnant with my first baby. And so I had been able to work in this space so comfortably for so long until I had this realization, like, this could be my child that gets hurt. This could be the baby that's in my tummy that, has this as their reality. And from that moment, I just went home and I said to my husband, like, I need to do preventative work. Like, we need to be reducing this in our community. And so I had the idea of creating the Safe Kids project, which is a sexual abuse prevention platform, for a really long time. But first baby, it's not the easiest thing to just then start a new side to the business. And so when I had my second baby back in September 2023. Yes. It's terrible. I don't know his birth date. And once I got over early postpartum, I thought, this feels like the right time to start moving my work into prevention. So that is how the Safe Kids project came to be. I am really passionate about sharing knowledge around body safety and prevention of sexual harm, because if I have the knowledge, why wouldn't I share it? Like, it's such an incredible, resource to have. Why can't everybody have those resources, is how I feel. So that's how it came to be.
It is honestly one of the most powerful subjects to get out there because, as you're saying, like, it's really like this tapu or taboo topic, and people would much rather just sweep it under the rug than to bring it out into the open and not only discuss with other adults in that preventative space, but then to be able to actually put that into practice with either their own children or if, as early childhood teachers in their centre. So I just think what you are doing, you are trailblazing in this arena, and it's so, so important. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you are doing and the amount of children and, young adults that are literally going to have the trajectory of their life changed because of this work. Like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I like, honestly, I see it blowing up and getting really massive and going not only nationwide but worldwide. So could
Oh,
you
thank
please
you.
explain exactly what body safety education is and why it is so important for parents and early childhood teachers alike to actually prioritize this and start speaking about it?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Those are such kind words. Yeah, so how I like to define body safety is all about a child understanding their body, protecting their body, and respecting their body. So it's much like, and I really hope this happens for the future, that we teach our child how to brush their teeth, or we teach them how to cross the road. That's keeping them safe and healthy, but we're not talking about their body. So body safety is about how can they keep their body safe from any form of harm. And so the way that I like to say it in a really simple way is that body safety is about teaching your child they are the boss of their body and they get to choose what happens to it at a really foundational level. I think it can become quite complex, and everybody has a sort of perception on what it is, but actually it's about a child knowing, understanding, and protecting their body. So, why I find that it is so important that we're actually starting to shine some light on it, two kind of key areas. First is that for healthy relationships going forward, if we start in early childhood and give them this really strong foundation of your body belongs to you, you get to make choices for yourself, you need to respect other people's bodies, all of these like very basic consent, body autonomy tools, then their relationships from a very early age are going to be positive, are going to be safe, are going to be healthy, rather than waiting till they're 15 and being like, okay, let's have the sex talk. I really don't believe in anything like that. I don't believe teaching a child about their body has to be difficult or has to be awkward or has to be scary. It's actually just a part of their development. And so if we can start that really early, the trajectory of their relationships are going to be significantly more healthy and happy. There's some research out of the Netherlands actually where they have a very strong body safety program for young children, and parents are encouraged to have those conversations. And the statistics long term around young people engaging in their first sexual experience and things are significantly more positive than anywhere else in the world. They're doing it safer, they're doing it later. So we know, like, there is research out there saying if we can talk about this stuff, it's going to lead to healthier relationships long term. So that's a big part of it. And then coming from my work perspective, it's all about abuse prevention. Like, if we can give our children tools to keep themselves safe, why would we not be doing it? Like, we don't drop a child in a pool without any knowledge on how to swim. Like, we teach them, they learn. It's the same concept when it comes to their body. We need to start teaching them. We can't just expect them to do it sort of on their own. So that's why I believe it is so important, because the earlier we give them the tools and the skills and the strategies to recognize when something's unsafe, the more likely they are to prevent incidences where there is abuse. And I'm a really firm believer in we can't determine who comes into our child's life and their journey and who they will meet along the way. But as parents, teachers, anybody that has an influential role, we can give those children tools to keep themselves safe. So that's why I'm so big about it. And then just on the part around early childhood teachers, I think they play such a pivotal role in this particular thing, part of body safety, because they get to see our children interact with peers, which is not something that we as parents see all the time. Like, yes, you might go to coffee groups or sports or play groups, but to see a child in a social setting day in, day out provides a huge information and also a really great space for role modeling, because you get to be influential in a social interaction, whereas parents, we might be a bit more influential in a like home family kind of way. So yeah, I think parents and ECE teachers huge role to play in this.
It wasn't until when I was still practicing as an early childhood teacher, like a few years in, where I did one professional development off the cup,
Yeah.
about body safety and things like that. it's not something that was interwoven within our qualification.
Yeah.
And I think it's so, so important for, as you said, like they see our children within those interactions, and possibly as a teacher listening to this, you haven't even thought about the fact that that could be a danger in itself, with children possibly doing things to other children that aren't safe. So instead of waiting until, like, I know it's earlier in primary schools now, but like back in our day, like the age of like 11, 12, having like safe sex education. It's like, well, sometimes that's too late. Well, what about that whole gap in between? So yeah, it's such important work. And I know you emphasize the importance of like emotional literacy and then building trust with children. So how can our parents and teachers foster an environment where children feel safe to express their emotions around those sensitive topics like body safety?
Yeah, great question. So I always say emotional literacy is the ability to recognize an emotion within yourself and within others, and then be able to express that. Obviously, that can be a lot more complex, that definition, but for young children, even preschool, it can be really hard for them to identify what an emotion is within them and then how they can express that, or be able to see that within somebody else, because body safety concepts like consent, they don't just need to recognize when they feel unsafe, they need to start seeing when other people are feeling unsafe. And you touched on it a little bit before, like if you start education when they're 12, far too late, because they've had so many interactions with other young people up until that point. There is so many opportunities for inappropriate sexual behavior. There is a very, very high statistic of abuse happening between children, peer to peer. We call it harm rather than sexual abuse. We would call it inappropriate sexual behavior or inappropriate harm. And so, yeah, we need to start really early for that main sort of thing. But emotional literacy is so important for body safety education, because we need a child to recognize within their body that something's not safe. And so that is what is so important, that they get the skills to go, oh, like I'm starting to feel butterflies in my tummy, or I've noticed like my body feels a bit tingly. Those are warning signs that something's not right. I'm unsafe. I need to talk to a trusted adult. So that's why it's so important. And then how I would encourage teachers and parents to be building emotional literacy within their child is to start role modeling it. It's such a thing that I probably talk about throughout this whole podcast. I'm really passionate about role modeling and the role that we play as adults. But people sort of shy away from talking about emotions with their children. And totally, we don't want to like bombard them with our day and how it's been and things, but there's actually age appropriate ways to introduce emotions to children. And we want to normalize that as parents, we experience a huge range of emotions. There's this like concept like, oh, we all have to be happy and happiness is the goal and we're all about contentment. And actually, that's completely false. And if you're trying to install that in your child, also not helpful or healthy. The human experience is to experience a range of emotions all of the time. Like that is what it is. And so we want to normalize that for our kids. So role modeling it and being like, oh, mama feels super energetic today. Like let's do some dancing. Or mum's feeling really overwhelmed. Like I'm going to take 5 deep breaths. So you'll notice in there that it is not about blaming anybody for the emotion that you're experiencing, because as an adult, you hold accountability for your emotions and we do not put that on anybody else. But I'm saying it's normal to feel overwhelmed and I can problem solve out of it. Like I can, yeah, maybe want to sit with my overwhelm for a bit, but actually I'm going to take 5 deep breaths. So I'm saying to my kids, I'm not going to feel like this forever. And there's a way to move through it if I don't like this discomfort. So role modeling our emotions is key. Keep it age appropriate and do not blame anybody, particularly children, for that experience. Where possible, we don't get this right every time. Like we're only humans, but where possible. Another idea would be to label the emotion for your child. So you might notice they're really sad in that moment. Like, hey, darling, I can see you're really sad right now. It's okay to feel sad. Like, I'm here for you if you're sad. Same if they're angry, same if they're happy. And the key with this is that you really want to hold the space no matter what emotion's showing up, because then your child saying, okay, or your the students or children you're supporting will say, oh, I can go to them no matter what. They're going to be there. They're going to meet me safely. They're not going to judge me. They're not going to embarrass me or shut me down and dismiss me. And that's how we build trust, so that in the future, if sensitive things come up, they're like, oh, okay, well, mum's been there for me before. And yeah, that was a hard thing to talk about, but mum held the space for that. So I think it's really about active listening, open listening, like really holding space for whatever it is. And that will build that foundation of trust, so they will come to you in the future.
And it's such a different perspective than possibly what we were brought up with, where it was like, if
Mm-hmm.
you're making a big song and dance and
Yeah.
you're having big emotions, like that's absolutely not okay. And we just need to fix it and be happy as quickly as possible. But same thing in everything that I speak about in my work. It's like giving that time and that space and that energetic calm so that they can feel the emotions when they are in those moments, and that's where like that co-regulation comes in. But absolutely, like I will all the time I model whatever I'm going through to my children, 3-year-old and 15 months. I'm like, oh, mummy's just feeling really overwhelmed. I just need to take a moment to recenter myself. Like, and my toddler actually does understand that, and I'll hear it reflected back to me where
Yeah.
he's trying to do something, like he drops something. He's like, oh, I'm just feeling really frustrated. I said, okay, what do you need to do about it? Should we stomp our feet, or should we move that energy around in our bodies? Because otherwise, as we well know, emotions actually get stuck in our
Mm-hmm.
body. And then it's not until later on in life, like this past couple of years, I've been going really deep into breath work and all of the things to shift those emotions that have been stagnated in my body for decades. So yeah, like I just think that's just such a great way that you've explained the whole emotional literacy, both for adults and for children.
Yeah,
And I
it's
know
so
there's,
amazing when, oh, sorry, when they reflect it back to you. It's just, you sort of hear things, and same with my daughter. And she said my husband was doing something the other day with some renovations at home, and he messed something up, and he was quite frustrated with himself, and he was saying things, and she said, "It's okay, Dada, you can try again. You can do
oh,
it." And I was like, wow, one of those like parenting wins as well. Like, not as parenting is wild and there's so many things, but if we like pause and take in those moments, like, oh my goodness, I'm teaching my daughter that she can make mistakes and she can try again. And, like, they're beautiful things that we should celebrate as well.
absolutely. And it is, it's being, all the little pieces of the puzzle are dropping in, whether we realize it at the time or not. It's those repetitive, consistent ways of being there and sharing those little tips that they then, yeah, show it back to us. So that's so cool. You touched on before some of the key elements of teaching body autonomy to young children. So, how can parents and teachers then introduce those concepts like personal boundaries and private parts in really like age appropriate ways? How would they do that?
Yeah, so body autonomy, like defined as for young people, is that you get to choose and make decisions that are best for your body and how others interact with your body. So again, it comes back to that idea of you are the boss of your body, you decide how this happens. I am a full advocate for body autonomy, always with children, but I think there's also, and this can be really helpful for parents, because it's sort of like, oh, well, with my child, like how much do I just let them keep doing this? Because actually it's not safe. My daughter will often maybe be getting a little bit rough with her younger brother. I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 15-month-old baby as well. And she might be, dragging him along by the hand. And I'll say, you need to let go of his hand. He doesn't feel safe. And she'll say, but I'm the boss of my body. So she learned really quickly, like, how she could start using this. So I think it's really important for parents to also have boundaries and limits around body autonomy. So if I just can touch on those quickly, that would be great as well. So I
Yeah.
have body autonomy limits in my house and what I teach with my children. So these are health, hygiene, and safety. And this is where, as a parent, you're saying, you get to make all choices about your body, everything except these three things. And so it might be, you need to take your child's temperature because they don't feel well. They don't want it. That's a boundary you put in as an adult. Hygiene, that nobody likes brushing their teeth or having a shower. Again, a boundary. Actually, I'm your mum or I'm your dad. I'm helping you make that choice right now. And then safety, they might be trying to run across the road or climb a ridiculously high tree that's just not safe. Again, they might say, but I'm the boss of my body, as my daughter has done many a times. I would say to her, darling, that's actually not safe, and my job as your mama is to keep you safe. So being really mindful of allowing your child body autonomy, but just being really careful that you're still keeping your boundaries as a parent. And one way you can do that is with some really clear body communication. So it's things like telling them what you're doing. I'm going to put the thermometer in your ear right now. Why are you doing it? I'm doing it because you seem really miserable and I want to check how you're doing. Validate them. Like, I know you don't like stuff in your ears. Like, is there anything I can do to help? Would you like a teddy bear? Would you like to sit on my knee? You know, that kind of thing. So it's having the boundary, but doing it in a like informative kind way as well. But my main ways that I enforce body autonomy with preschool age children is I let my children always choose how they greet other people. So this
Yes.
is, yeah, so things like, do you want to give a high five or a hug or just wave, like completely your choice. And this one can be like a little bit difficult to uphold as a parent because we have different family systems and cultural systems and societal systems that we live in. And sometimes that can be seen as really rude. And so I think with this, it's about being super mindful as well, how you manage this. But I say having something like a script that you can say is really good. It's just like, hey, we're teaching Bobby right now that he gets to choose how people touch his body. He'll let you know what he's comfortable with. You will more than likely get pushback. You will more than likely get judgment. I've had extended family come and stay at my place, and things like people that haven't seen my daughter in a really long time will say, "Can I have a hug?" And she'll say no, and they say, "Oh, well, that's making me feel sad." And so as a
No.
parent, yeah, there's this part of me that's like, oh gosh, I have to do this. Is like, this is my part of this body safety advocacy. My daughter's said her part, amazing as a 3-year-old. Now I have to step in and explain that script, like we're letting her choose what happens to her body, and also a key part there that my daughter is not responsible for how you feel. So
Well done.
yeah, tricky. It's really tricky. Like years of my experience and all my like research and knowledge, and I still find this stuff really difficult. So know that it's not like super straightforward and you don't get it right every single time. But there are moments where you do it, and I felt really proud afterwards, despite how difficult
Yeah.
it was. So yeah, greetings, letting my children choose how they dress themselves. This is wild. I really like fully embracing it as well because my daughter gets a lot of hand-me-downs from one of my friends. So everything's very mismatched and a little bit quirky. Like sometimes we'll wear togs with a tutu and gumboots and we just rock it, like
Yes.
completely go with it. And this is saying to her, you can choose what feels comfortable on your body, like go for it. And we have been having some cooler weather at the moment, even though it's summer. And she's wanted to wear like little, dresses with tutus and stuff, and it's cold outside. And, there's a part of me, and often I'll say, let's put a jumper on. And she's like, no, mum, I don't want a jumper. And it's like, okay, I've got to respect that. Or she doesn't want to wear shoes. Yeah, if we're in like a place where that's safe, fine, don't wear shoes. Like it is your body, you get to choose what happens to it. And then also like thinking about how your child interacts with other kids. Like we're really mindful if they don't want to play with someone, don't force them to play with somebody, those types of things. So body autonomy, really like just let them do what feels right for their body as long as they're safe, healthy, all of that kind of stuff. And then you touched on personal boundaries, how I teach that. Yeah, so with that, I think at a preschool age, the concept of a personal bubble is really, really great. And so what you can do, and what I do with my clients and children, is explain that everybody has a personal bubble, and it's a space around their body, and they get to choose who comes into the bubble, they get to choose how long they stay there for, they get to choose what happens when they're in the bubble, but everybody has a bubble, and they get to decide what happens in there. And so you can explain it to them, but you can also use it in practical things. So, for example, if my daughter's trying to sit on my knee for the 597th time that day, I might say, darling, mama would really like some space right now. Here's my personal bubble. You can be anywhere outside of that. So really starting to role model and show her that I have a personal bubble. It's okay. It's normal to feel and have this space that's yours. And then that encourages her to have hers as well. And if she were to come into my bubble or, cross that boundary, that's when I use language with her like stop or this is my space, or this is my body, please move away. And again, it's role modeling, and it's giving her the language for her to be able to advocate for her own body autonomy as
Yes.
well. So yeah, I think that sort of thing is really, really helpful for body autonomy and how we can be teaching it. Also respecting her personal bubble. So always saying like, can I have a hug? Or if she's snuggled up on the couch watching something or playing on her, with her book, can I come give you a cuddle? She might say no. It's like, okay, fully respect that as well, because that's what consent
Mm.
is. But yeah, definitely role modeling and giving them the language and the wording when something doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great explanation, and I love the bubble. And like we've heard it before, it's like this is the my bubble, this is my space, but then to actually role model so that then they have the words or like mini little scripts that they can then use because they've had it in normal interactions with people that they feel really comfortable with, and as well like looking at from like a self-regulation for us as adults, like sometimes we do get touched out, like if you're trying to eat a
Mhm.
meal and then you've got your 15-month-old climbing up to try and have boob at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like knowing to put those boundaries in place prior to that. I mean, a little bit different with the younger ones, but you can still actually start using those words and that language because they do like they understand so much more, I think, than
Mm.
a lot of people give them credit for. And because we speak about an energetic bubble, so put your energetic bubble up, and or talk about like grounding with your tree roots. But it's quite cool to then bring in that physical aspect as well. And I know, well, not personally because I have been within this world for a wee while of like the anatomically correct words, but I know that many parents do struggle with using those kind of terms for body parts. So, why is it so crucial that we do like use the actual real life names? And how can we invite parents and teachers to kind of overcome that discomfort and then like normalize these conversations?
Yeah, another fab question. So anatomically correct labels are all about using the like scientific or medical terms for the body. Totally get it. It is uncomfortable when you first start. I didn't grow up in a family where we use anatomically correct words. We did not do that at all. We 100% use pet names for private parts. And
Hmm.
so I think why it is so difficult is because we weren't brought up using anatomically correct labels. Well, majority of us weren't. And the thing with the brain is the brain likes familiarity, because when we give the brain familiarity, it feels safe. And so it's like, okay, well, these are the words that I grew up using. So I'm going to feel safe. That's what I'm going to use. And then we say to the brain, actually, we're going to use something that evokes an emotion with us, and it evokes an emotion within others as well. So there's that fear of judgment that sits in that piece too. So the brain's like, danger, 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 don't want to go there. So I think it's very, very normal. And I completely understand it. And I completely sort of resonate with everybody that feels that way. Um, but I do use it in my family. I think most people in my family know, oh, that just what happens at Victoria's house now. So they've kind of just had to roll with it. I have a funny story that we went camping with my dad, and my daughter had, I don't know, she was quite 3. She might have been just almost 3. And they went for a walk down to the lake, and my daughter was asking if there were sharks in the lake. And my dad said, no, no, there's no sharks. But if there was, they'd bite your bottom. And she was like, oh, do you mean my vulva? And my dad was like, do you mean your front bum? And she's like, no, granddad, that is called a vulva. And so then my dad came back to the campsite and he said, oh, we've just had an interesting chat about vulvas. And I was like, oh, yeah, great. Like, and I think she wasn't even quite 3. And I was like, wow, like she's advocating for the correct terminology for her body. Like, you
Yes.
go, girl. And also just opened up a really beautiful conversation with my dad. Like, we'd never had
Mm.
that conversation. We'd never talked about it. My dad doesn't live nearby, so we sort of hadn't needed to. But yeah, it segued really nicely into that sort of conversation. So for me, it is very normalized now, but it wasn't normalized. And I totally, totally understand that it can feel uncomfortable. But the reason that we do it in body safety education and why it is so important is that if you don't, you are creating shame and stigma about a child's body.
Mm.
If you call an elbow, you call a knee, why do you call a penis a willy? Like, when you really think about it, it's like instantly from the outset, you're teaching your child never talk about that.
Not in
Never
a way
go
that's,
there.
yeah, anatomically correct.
Yeah, it's saying like, oh, we can't even say the right name for that, let alone hold space to talk about it. Like, no way.
Mm.
So if we don't use those terms, we create stigma and we create shame and we almost
Yes.
shut down any chance of some really open and honest conversations, which is we don't want. Also, when we use the correct terminology, we empower our children. If they know that that's their penis and they can come and talk to you about it, great. Like, why would you not want a child that feels empowered about their body, that can talk about their body in such a confident way? It's like a no brainer. But then from the really challenging part or the uncomfortable part is it's a really good sexual abuse prevention tool.
Yeah.
Because if a child at 2, 3 knows that that's their vulva and they get into a vulnerable situation with somebody and start using that terminology, that is a big deterrent from somebody continuing to harm that child because they know, oh, that child knows that. They know the words for that. They've been taught that.
Mm.
They, therefore, are having these conversations at home. So it's a huge prevention tool in that sense as well. And then, sadly, as well, when we look at statistics of people being sexually abused in the court system, I personally have worked with a young person who was brave enough to go through the court process, but because they didn't have the correct terminology, it was cancelled out. So, which is just so wild. I mean, in New Zealand, they believe that only 10% of sexual abuse cases are even reported to police. 3% of those will go to court, and there will be a 1% conviction. So, that in itself is alarming and scary and so, so wild. Um, so, yeah, we need them to have the correct terms. I mean, really, hopefully not that it happens to them, but if it does, they have the tools to be able to talk about it.
I didn't even think about that being a deterrent. Like, of course, that makes so much sense. It's like if an adult, and you know how it's like stranger danger, but it's like, well, what about the people you know? You just never know what they have been through, and then they might go on to do it, and then they hear this word, "Don't touch my vulva." No, they would like, okay, you know about this stuff. Well, I can't get away with that. So yeah, amazing. That's a really, really good point. Um, so, how can parents and teachers teach children about consent in their everyday routines? Are you able to maybe just share some practical examples for them of how to empower children to say no, like with confidence?
Yeah, definitely. So, consent as well is all about a child making decisions from a really enthusiastic, excited, happy yes. This is like a hell yeah yes, not just like a oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, yeah kind of thing. So, we want our children to start to learn that they actually get to make that decision about their body, which is the body autonomy aspect of it. And so, how we teach consent in our house is quite simple, and also with my clients is we have the first step. We teach them that they need to ask. Like that is the number one thing. Before you touch somebody's body, you ask them. Number
Mm-hmm.
two is you listen. Like you really stop and listen to what that person has to say, and then you respect that decision as well. So it's really important that they start to learn this system that actually when I interact with somebody else, I ask first, I listen to what that person wants to say, and then I respect that. And the main way we do this is role modeling. So I will role model this with my kids, and so does my husband, day in, day out. Can I have a hug? Yes, great, let's have a hug. Or my daughter will hop out of the shower, and my husband will say, can I dry your vulva? Yes or no. Like she
Mm-hmm.
might pick today, she wants to do it. Absolutely fine. But what we're starting to do is we're going to show her that it's really, really normal and like super important that you ask all the time and you listen and respect that choice that that person gives. So I think parents and early childhood teachers can also start to do that in their interactions. Again, there's body autonomy limits. So there's times when, yes, you get to override that. But also it's just like, make it normal. Make it so that they're seeing in everyday interactions that somebody asks before they touch your body. Like that's sort of the key part of it. Another thing that we do in our home is we encourage our daughter to start looking at other people's body language, at their words that they're saying, at their facial expression. Because when we're teaching consent, we're not just teaching a child that they have to be asked before somebody touches their body. We're teaching them that they need to start asking for consent as well before they touch somebody else's body. This is really important. The statistics is, again, really high around peer-to-peer abuse or sibling to sibling. So we just need to be mindful that our child is also being respectful of other people's boundaries. So with our daughter, it might look like she's trying to pick up our son, and I might say to her, darling, can you see on his face that right now he doesn't like this? Like, he's frowning and his body language is pushing you away. He's pushing you with his hands, and you can hear in his voice, he doesn't have words yet, but the way he's talking is saying, or making noise, is saying, I don't like this. And so really starting to get her to stop and start to see, hear, feel somebody else's experience in that physical contact is really, really important, and something that we do. And in order to get a child to say no confidently and have those tools, first is they have to understand body autonomy. So they have to understand they are the boss of their body. They get to decide what happens. Because if they can do that, then they know, oh, I'm allowed to advocate for myself. I'm allowed to say no. And so then it's that practicing it as well, showing them you've said no before and giving them that language and those tools, and reminding them that they get to choose. So you might be going to a family event, might be like Christmas or something, and everybody's getting together. You might say, hey, darling, like, just remember your body's your body. You get to decide what happens to it. And so really encouraging them, maybe through role play, or maybe you can even practice. You might say, what would you say to your cousin or your auntie if they got too close and you didn't feel comfortable? So giving them opportunities to practice as well is really, really good.
Oh, some really awesome, just simple, practical
Yeah.
tools. And it's like those you can put them in to practice straight away.
Yes.
Definitely agree with my older son and my younger daughter. If he's like trying to grab, like, oh, he's trying to cuddle her, trying to grab her or move her. He's like, I'm just guiding her, mum. But I'm like, no, can you see her face? And yeah, everything that you were just explaining then. But then also if my younger one is doing something to my older one, like she's getting a bit excited or like hitty or something like that, we'll say like, no, look, can you see that brother's not enjoying that? He's trying to move away. So then he sees that we also are advocating for his body autonomy at the same time. So like kind of, yeah, from both sides. And I know in your course you touch on the topic of people and interactions, which you just kind of touched on again there, but you're including things in that like with your greetings and keeping secrets versus surprises, which is something that we have done from day dot with my little one. And we've also educated our family around that and the reasoning behind it, as well as you speak of grooming. So question being like, how can parents and educators then navigate those situations to then equip children with the confidence and awareness around those kind of topics?
Yeah. So I think with greetings, like I said before, I always give my children choice, and I remind them before we go to something, hey, remember that we're seeing people we haven't seen for ages and they probably want to give you a cuddle. You get to decide.
Yeah.
So running through like what it is that they can decide. Maybe you want to wave, maybe you want to hug, maybe you want to high five. In my course as well, I have lots of resources and things, and I actually have a printout with different ways that the child might choose to greet somebody. So having something like that on the fridge is great because it's this constant reminder that actually you get to choose. And say you have friends popping around like, oh, hey, our friends are coming around for a barbecue tonight. Remember, like, you get to choose. Maybe you can point to something if a child isn't wanting to express it or doesn't feel confident yet. They can point to a high five, and that's what happens in the family. Again, it's that part where actually you have to advocate as a parent for your child. Really, really important, really uncomfortable sometimes, but you'll be very proud that you have done it. And reinforce your child. Like, if they say no to somebody, inside I'm always like, yeah, get it, girl. Like, you know your body, you know what feels right, and you're comfortable to tell somebody no. Like, how awesome is that? Because, you know, when I was growing up, that was never a thing. It was like, oh, here's your nana, say hi, give her a hug. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, but like, it's just, my daughter knows that she doesn't have to do that. And yeah, reinforce that. Like, hey, I'm really proud of you for listening to your body. Like, good on you. Um, and then in terms of secrets and surprises, something that I'm super, super big on is that we do not have secrets in our house. We have a no secrets policy, and I really recommend this to your listeners as well as
Mm.
my clients and people in my world. And the reason for this is grooming at sort of the foundation level of why we don't do it. So, as part of the grooming process, there is testing boundaries and building trust. And so, what people will do is they will try and test with little things like they might give your child an ice cream and say, "Don't tell mum." They'll
Mm.
wait. Did they tell mum? Okay, no, they didn't. Right, I've got a little bit of trust. And that will slowly be built on and built on and built on until potentially it gets to a point where there is sexual abuse or sexual harm. So, what we have in our house instead is we're allowed surprises. Like, we're all for surprises. Surprises are great. And we explain the difference to our daughter. So the way I did this recently with her was, well, not super recently, but for her brother's birthday, I let her pick something for him, and she said, "Oh, we're going to keep it a secret." And I said, "No, darling, actually, we're going to keep it a surprise." And she was like, "Oh." And so just using the everyday moments to be like a secret, something
Mm.
we never tell people, and we don't do that in our house, but we can have a surprise. And a surprise is when somebody will eventually find out. So he's going to find out what his present is, or, a surprise birthday, a surprise dinner. Eventually we find out, and those are okay. Yeah, and the main reason for this is to limit any chance of grooming. This is one of the ones that also needing to talk to sort of extended family or people that are in your child's life. My mum very unintentionally had my daughter, and I think they might have gotten ice cream or something, and it was like, "Don't tell mum." And she'd be like, "Hey, mum, we don't do that. We don't keep secrets. We don't encourage her to keep anything from us." Mum was 100% on board, totally understood that. Um, because a child can't differentiate between a good secret and a bad secret. Like, if
No.
somebody inappropriately touched them, they wouldn't know that that secret, I'm allowed to keep the secret about the ice cream, but I'm not allowed to keep the secret about someone touching my vulva. Like, it needs to be super black and white. And
Mm.
yeah, so no secrets is a really big one for me. And grooming is not something that we outwardly talk to children in the preschool years about, because we're really mindful in body safe to keep it age appropriate and to
Mhm.
not build or create any form of fear in relationships with others. And so grooming is very much on the parent or the teacher to know those signs. And so it's things like targeting children. People that groom often target people that are, or young people that are perceived as maybe weaker or more vulnerable or less resources or less support. Things like building trust. So, buying gifts or doing things for them, testing boundaries, isolation, all of those types of things. And instead of talking to a child about grooming, I would encourage talking about strange behavior. So we don't
Mm.
necessarily teach stranger danger anymore. We teach strange behavior. And that is because 90% of people that are sexually abused know the person that abused them.
Wow,
90%.
that's huge, eh?
It's so crazy. And so this concept of like somebody pulling up at the park and showing you a puppy and taking you in their van,
Yeah,
although
yeah.
yes, like there is a reality that that could happen, 90% of it is somebody well known to that child, or even to the family. So we want our children to start to recognize behavior that gives them those warning signs in their body. So if anybody does anything that makes you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, or you have those things in your body, like your heart starts to go really fast, or you really need to go toilet, or you feel a bit shaky, that's strange behavior. And that's when you need to come and talk to a trusted adult.
Mm. Oh, yeah, that's so like good in terms of putting it into what their body would be feeling as well. So it's like gives them a tangible thing to go off,
Yeah.
and really simplifying it. But yeah, I think that's really important as well for us to know as adults. The grooming, that process, that's something we need to be really aware of. With that statistic of 90%, I knew it was up there, but I actually did not know that that was the statistic. That's insane and really actually quite scary.
Mm.
But you can see how it happens. You can see that that's like obviously a lot easier if somebody's already known to that child for it to go south quite quickly if that's within their intentions.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, love that. Secrets versus surprises. Thank you for the way you explained that. Um, hitting you with all the practical strategies, but is there something that you could speak on to about how we can teach children public versus private spaces, especially when parenting or like preparing, sorry, for situations like play dates or sleepovers? I mean, personally, I don't know at what age or if at all I would trust my children with sleepovers. And now I'm thinking back on it, I'm like, man, we did lots of sleepovers from a young age, but I feel like times have changed a little bit.
Mhm.
I don't know if I've just got less trust or what it is, but yeah, some strategies for parents who are open to that kind of idea.
Yeah, great question. And I feel like it's such a hot topic at the moment. I am
Mm.
also like you. My children have owned, well, my son has not, but my daughter has had sleepovers only with family members that I trust. And the thought of her getting older and asking for a sleepover gives me proper anxiety. So I totally feel you on that one. Um, in terms of private and public spaces, I find that this is just a really good concept that a young person can kind of like grapple with to understand and reduce any shame around their body and what they do with their body, because sexual behavior or exploring of the body is normal even in preschool, early childhood years. Like that is a
Yes.
normal part of development. And yes, it can make us feel uncomfortable as adults and things like that. And yes, there are points where it becomes concerning or harmful. And so we do need to be really mindful of that and aware of that as well as parents and educators. But there are things like the kids being naked or nudity, masturbation, things like this are actually really normal in early childhood. And so we use the public versus private place as a way to sort of redirect that behavior so that it fits within sort of societal norms. And that can
Mm.
look really different for every sort of household. But we have to be mindful that if a child is exploring their body and maybe masturbating or whatever, that's not appropriate to do when you're at the park. And so
Mm.
we use it in our family as more of a redirection tool. So if my daughter maybe had her hands down her pants, I would say, okay, darling, that's something that's absolutely fine to do, but we do that in a private place, like your bedroom or the bathroom. And so what
Mhm.
we don't want to do is we don't want to create shame for her body or maybe or their body
Yeah.
or whatever they're doing with their body. We just redirect it back to a place where it's appropriate to do that. Or you might notice in the early childhood setting that children are playing in the bathroom, like not a place to play. Hey guys, this is a private place. How about we go back
Mm.
out to the forest where it's a public place and where we play? So really getting them to determine and distinguish the difference between the two places and what behaviour is appropriate and not between the two, which can really help when you go into the play dates and sleepovers, because they know that, okay, if I'm in a private place, nobody else should be there with me. So if I'm in the bathroom at this person's house, that's a private place. I'm allowed to have, naked or whatever it is, and that nobody else should be there with me. So um, that ties in really nicely. But in terms of if you're deciding if you would like to do a play date or a sleepover without you being there, this is really up to the individual, and it's a super, super tricky one. My sort of advice here would be, if it was a family that you were sending your child to, well, firstly, if possible, can the child stay at your house and have the sleepover there? But
Yeah.
if your child is really determined to go somewhere, make sure you know the family, like really know the
Mm.
family. I'm not talking like have spoken to them 2 or 3 times on the soccer field. These are like people you've been to their house. You know who's at their house. You know the family dynamic. Then you need to be mindful of, are they having visitors over? Does the child have older or younger siblings? Do they have friends coming over? Being really aware of who is in the space would be my first thing. And do you know them well enough to be able to have some open conversations with them?
Mm.
Secondly, would be about supervision. So there would be a lot of conversations about who's watching my child. Are they allowed in a room by themselves with another child? Is doors open? Are doors shut? Do they have access to a device? Do they not have access to a device? Are they left in the care of like an older teenager, or is it just with the parents? So really mindful of supervision. Thirdly, I would be saying the boundaries that you have at home around body safety, around body autonomy, can you comfortably communicate that to the host family? Because if you cannot do that, it is not a safe option, because you need to feel comfortable to say, these are our rules. and can they uphold them? And if they can do that, then maybe that's something that you would consider. But yeah, being really firm on your boundaries and communicating them so that you will get the feel whether or not that's something that's going to be upheld in that space as well.
Yeah, there's so many different factors that people may not take into consideration when deciding whether to do a sleepover. Can be a little bit grey and murky as opposed to super
Mm.
black and white. And then something on top of that is like, do they do drugs? Is there alcohol there? Like those kind of things that are also quite taboo. Like, oh yeah, so they might smoke a bit of weed, but then what happens then? Who comes over to do that with them? If they're having a
Who's
drink,
supervising the kids then? Like, yeah, that's the
exactly.
kind of, yeah,
Yeah, and how you touched on like whether to have the door closed or open, and yeah, the siblings. Oh my gosh, there's just there's not to freak everybody out and to be like keep your children home 24/7, but also these are some things that you could take into consideration, and
yeah, I
obviously,
do. Sorry, I do talk about in my course as well, like the pros and cons list, because we have to
mm,
be realistic that our children also need to have experiences outside of our house, and that is developmentally normal to spend a night away from their parents, or yeah, just get a little bit uncomfortable, staying at some other person's place. So that's all
yeah,
part of life and social development and stuff. So it really is about sort of weighing that up for you. And there is no right or wrong answer, but yeah, there is a
mm,
lot to consider.
yeah, just possibly just considering where that might unfold. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and having those really like honest conversations with the host family as such. Um, just to kind of finish our beautiful chat off, could you maybe share some advice on helping children to identify safe adults, which is quite a good segue into this, and then you speak of creating a safe circle. So what role, I guess, does actually modeling respectful behaviour play in fostering that open communication in that kind of
Yeah.
respect?
Yeah. So, in terms of a safe network or a safe circle, I really encourage this for parents to start to have open conversations with their children about who is safe in their life. And it's not about you determining as a parent, like, oh, well, nanny's a safe person or auntie's a safe person. It's about actually sitting down, or maybe you're in the car and you're driving and you might just say, hey, darling, who's some safe adults in your life? Like, who's a person
Mm,
that you really love and you feel really warm and happy and excited to be with them? Because what we don't want to start to do is override what feels right for them and who their safe people are. So, in terms of coming up with that safety circle, let your child do it. Have the conversation. Make it casual, make it formal, whatever you want. You can do an activity I have in my course, which is like the five, like a handprint, and you draw around it. And then in each finger, you write down a safe person and you let your child
mm,
decorate it, and it becomes quite a fun activity. But really, here it's like, why is that person safe? Like, what is it that they do that makes you feel safe? Is there something more I can do as your mama or your dad or your teacher that makes you feel safe? So it's really letting your child explore and start to recognize what safe feels like for them. And then you can
mm,
have conversations like, if anything happened, you could talk to your safe people. You could talk to Nanny. And if Nanny maybe wasn't listening that day, you could talk to Mama. And if I wasn't listening
mm.
that day, who would you talk to then? So make sure that they've got this idea that maybe if somebody doesn't listen that time, that somebody else will. So really encouraging that open communication with people. As children get older, you can start to have the conversation that just because somebody is safe doesn't mean they won't harm us. But I think preschool, it's a little bit too ambiguous. So I would steer away from that at that point. But say if, yeah, as long as they know that there's multiple safe people they can talk to, that sort of helps mitigate that a little bit. And then how we really foster that open communication, I think it's by being really honest and transparent and actually doing this work that we've just talked about. So it's like the role modeling, it's the showing up, it's holding space, it's like I'm here in all of the stuff that's going on in your world. You can trust me, like I've got you. Um, yeah.
So good. It's been such a I think for a lot of people, this might be quite an eye opening conversation, but it's one that I'm really passionate about getting out into the world and to grow this awareness as a collective and know that it's okay to feel uncomfortable and to just still push through in the name of safety of our children. Like, this is our future generation. We could really, really shift the way that they speak about their bodies, give them so much more empowerment as a result. And I really like just touching on what you said about the safe circle, and say like something, God forbid, did happen to a child, if they then went to go really nervously and to try and speak to one of these safe adults, but for whatever reason they're having a bad time or like not listening or didn't quite take it on board, knowing they can go to the next person and that it's actually they are going to be listened to, and that they're safe
Yeah.
to express.
Yeah, and I think, it's a difficult subject to talk about. And one of the key things I say here is like, as a parent or a teacher, is just shift the perspective. If you put the
Mm.
child at the center, you can, I guess, make decisions about educating them completely different. Because I always say to people, if you feel uncomfortable having the conversation, imagine how uncomfortable you'll feel if something happens because you didn't have the conversation.
Yes.
Like, I can
Wow.
guarantee that saying vulva in public with like all your high school friends with their kids there is uncomfortable, but what I see in my job day in, day out is significantly more uncomfortable than that. So shifting that perspective, like, oh, I don't want to feel uncomfortable now, to being like, what does my child need to stay safe, really
Mm.
can help you, just move through that discomfort and know that we don't get it right every time. Like, we just don't. But if we
Mm.
get it right like 85% of the time, like, that's awesome. So showing up and shifting your perspective can actually be really powerful.
And having self-compassion for when possibly it's not exactly as you'd wanted it, but so long as you're trying and making these small little tweaks along the way, it's going to create a huge impact as a result. Before we close off, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you wanted to share? And also, whereabouts can our listeners find you? Your Instagram, I'll put everything in the show notes, but your Instagram handle, your website, and if you'd like to just speak into your upcoming course that you've got, and when it's launching.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I am on Instagram at the Safe Kids Project. And yeah, I've got lots of education and tools and things on there that you can access as well with just my content. I also have a free resource, which is body autonomy affirmation cards, and they're a free
Mm.
downloadable resource. But they just get that conversation happening about what body autonomy is, and if we can get our child to recognize body autonomy, then they can start making sort of decisions for their body. So those are on there, and I highly recommend downloading them. They just help like start the conversation, but they help the conversation keep going as well, which is just so nice that body safety isn't a one-off thing as well. I don't know if that was kind of picked up, but I think I highlighted that this is not a one-off, like, okay, we've talked about consent, let's all be done. No, this is like day in, day out. This is your child's development. They are learning at some point to read and write. They're learning their body belongs to them. So I have a 6-week program, which is called the Foundations of Body Safety, and it highlights and touches on all of the things that we've spoken about, but really goes into detail about how to do that. And so one of the key aspects of my course is that not only do I give you the knowledge and the information in a video form, but I give you implementation activities. So these activities that you can do alongside your child, because it's really helpful to have the knowledge, but then how do we transfer that into our child's everyday life? And so in the course, there is how you transfer it in like an activity form. It might be a game or a worksheet or something to do together. And I include a small shift in there, which is like, how can we just change our mindset? How can we change the language? So like, as soon as you've watched the 10-minute video, bang, you can implement something, because as we learn, we want to implement. But it's super transformational. Like, I can promise you will feel as empowered and confident as I do to do this. And people will say things to you at family gatherings around why your child's not hugging, and you'll feel really comfortable and confident to be like, actually, this is just how it is for our
Yeah.
child. And the best part as well is that I'm there for the whole 6 weeks. Like, this is a challenging topic for some people, and I think it's really important that you have access to me and my expertise and guidance and support to ask and any questions that you want. But yeah, it's a program so that you can feel really confident and comfortable that your child will be safe and keep themselves safe where possible.
So powerful and so needed in the world. So highly, highly, highly recommend going and checking out Victoria's Instagram and downloading your free resource, and go and sign up to her course if you're ready for that transformation to go from feeling super uncomfortable, not knowing what to do, to actually having the tools and implementing it and feeling comfortable in those social situations, and knowing that not only that you are getting that transformation, but your child as a result is going to as well. So I'm just so grateful for everything that you're doing in the world, Victoria. It's just such a specialized topic that I feel like a lot of people are tiptoeing around, that you're just like trudging through, like we're going on a bear hunt, we've got to go through it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you again for
Yeah.
your time today as
Oh,
well.
thank you so much for having me. I've had the best time. I was like a little bit nervous, but I'm loving it. So thank you so much for having me, and all the wonderful work you do as well in this space. I do really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.